The first time I saw her crown, I thought it was a trick of light, because crowns are supposed to belong to old stories, to dusty museums, to paintings where the eyes never follow you, not to a rooftop in a living city under a sun that still looked normal, while the sky above Manhattan was split open by something that should not exist. There were cameras everywhere, the kind with long lenses that make you feel like your skin is made of glass. Microphones clustered like black flowers in front of the podium, and above all of it, hanging in the blue like a second moon, was the alien ship metallic gray, carved with impossible geometry, veins of blue light pulsing along its belly like it was breathing. Its shadow swallowed 3 skyscrapers at once, and still had room to cover the streets below. Helicopters circled at a careful distance, like insects that knew better than to touch a flame. I stood beside her because I had been told to, because men in uniforms had guided me through a stairwell that smelled like concrete and sweat, because there was no longer any such thing as refusing. My name is Daniel Mercer. I used to be a translator, the kind people forget exists until something breaks. I translated contracts for corporations that never looked up from their own reflections. I translated love letters for people too scared to say what they meant. I translated apologies for men who did not deserve forgiveness. And on the morning the sky changed, I was translating a routine shipment dispute for a shipping company that would not exist by nightfall. Then the sirens started, then everyone's phone screamed at once, then the city looked up, and the world held its breath. Now I was here, in a charcoal suit I had slept in, my throat dry. The sides of the podium to keep them still. The podium itself was not ours. It was hers, sleek dark metal, blue translucent panels glowing with script that did not belong to any alphabet humans had ever built. Symbols flowed like living things under the surface, rearranging themselves as if the podium was listening to the air. She stood on my left, tall and still, her purple cloak hanging heavy from her shoulders, gold trim catching the sunlight, white fur collar bright as snow against her green skin. Her face was too symmetrical, too calm, sharp enough to cut the wind. Her eyes were large and dark, not black like empty space, but deep like polished stone after rain. The crown on her head was silver and blue, jeweled like the night sky had been broken into pieces and set into metal. She looked like something a human artist would draw if they wanted to sell hope and fear in the same frame. And she looked at the crowd like the crowd belonged to her. The officials behind the cameras were sweating, trying not to show it. The reporters were shaking in that hungry way they shake when they know history is about to happen and they want to own it. The soldiers along the railing watched the sky more than they watched her, because even now their instincts screamed that the real danger was overhead. Carrying the smell of exhaust and summer and panic, I told myself I was only here because of language, because they needed someone who could turn the impossible into words, but I knew that was not the whole truth, because I had been brought here for a different reason, a reason that sat on my skin like a brand. She lifted her hand, slow, deliberate. Every camera snapped to focus. Every microphone leaned forward as if metal could listen harder. Her fingers were long and elegant. And when she raised her index finger, the entire rooftop went silent. Not the kind of silence you get when people choose to be quiet. The kind you get when something inside you understands that noise is useless. A translator's instinct is to search for meaning, but in that silence, I could feel something older than meaning, something primal, something that made every human body remember it was small. Then she began to speak. Her voice was not musical, not robotic, not monstrous. It was clear, confident, and somehow it carried, even without a microphone, as if the air itself made room for her words. The sound that came out of her mouth was not English. Not any language I knew, but the podium's blue panels pulsed, and I felt a vibration under my palms, like the machine was reading her intent, turning it into structure. A second later, a synthesized English voice rose from the podium. Smooth and neutral, citizens of Earth. The words hit the crowd like a wave, not because of what they meant, but because of what they proved. She had learned us. She had prepared for us. She had not drifted here by accident. The voice continued, "You are observed, you are measured, you are judged." A murmur moved through the cameras, through the men in suits, through the soldiers who wanted to pretend they did not feel their hearts pounding. The voice did not pause. "I am Sovereign Rhesus Kalar of the 13th Veil. This world is now under my protection." A journalist made a choking sound, like he had tried to swallow a word that was too large. Someone stands between you and a storm, or it can mean you are no longer allowed to walk outside without permission. I felt my stomach tighten, and I thought of my sister across the river in Queens. I thought of my father in a nursing home in Jersey, staring out a window, and wondering if the next war would finally finish him. The voice continued, "You are not my property. You are not my prey. You are not my enemy." The crowd exhaled, a ragged sound. Her head. And for the first time her eyes landed on me. It felt like being pinned by gravity. She lifted her hand again, the same slow certainty, and she pointed directly at my chest. Every camera swung. Every lens caught my face, my mouth slightly open, my eyes wide, my brain scrambling to find a reason that would not make me vomit. The voice from the podium continued, "This human is my proof." For a second I did not understand. Then the world erupted into noise. Reporters shouting, officials calling for quiet, a helicopter dipping as if the pilot's hands had twitched. My ears rang, my heartbeat slammed against my ribs like it wanted out. And my mind screamed one word, why I forced myself to breathe. I forced my hands to stay on the podium. Because if I moved, if I stepped back, if I flinched, it would look like guilt, or fear, or weakness. And weakness was a language the universe always translated into violence. The Queen's finger remained steady, unwavering, as if the entire planet had just become a courtroom, and I was the exhibit everyone needed to see. Survival confirms my promise. His bond with me confirms that Earth is not to be harvested, not to be broken, not to be silenced. Harvested, broken, silenced. Those were not words you used unless there had been plans, unless there had been predators, unless something had been coming for us. A man near the front shouted something about invasion, about demands, about tribute. Another voice screamed that this was a lie, that it was mind control, and I wanted to shout too. I wanted to demand answers. I wanted to ask how. My name had become a weapon, but the Queen raised her hand again, palm outward, and the rooftop quieted like someone had turned down the volume of humanity. Then she spoke directly, and the podium translated again. There are those beyond your sky who see your oceans as fuel, your cities as raw material, your bodies as experiments. They came once before. You did not know. You would not have survived if you had known. A coldness spread across my spine, she continued. I intercepted them at the edge of your system. I shattered their scouts. I warned their fleets. Now I declare this world under my shield. The crowd began to react again. Disbelief and terror mixing into something almost religious. Someone screamed a question about why. Someone demanded to know what she wanted. And the Queen turned her eyes back to the cameras. The translation came, calm, cutting. Because one of you stopped my war from becoming your extinction. Because one of you chose mercy when vengeance would have been easier. Because one of you reminded me what a living world sounds like. She pointed at me again, and the voice said, but to the night 2 weeks earlier, the night I had not been allowed to speak about, the night they had brought me into an underground room beneath a government building, where the lights were harsh and the air smelled like disinfectant. The night a sealed container had been opened in front of me, revealing a slab of alien metal that hummed like a sleeping animal. The night they told me they had found it in the ocean after an unexplained explosion. The night they said the metal was speaking, but no machine could translate it. The night I put my hand against it, and the humming changed, and my vision filled with blue light, and I heard a voice in my head that was not mine, not a voice made of sound, but a voice made of meaning, a voice that felt ancient and furious and tired. That was the first time I sensed her, Sovereign Reese's, not as a queen, but as a mind pressed against the edge of my reality, searching for a way in. I should have ripped my hand away. I should have screamed. Instead, I whispered the first words I could think of, because translation is what I do, because language is the only weapon I have ever trusted. I said, "I can hear you," and the metal pulsed, and the room shook, and every soldier's gun lifted in panic. Then the voice in my head said, with a clarity that made my bones vibrate, "You are not broken. You are not afraid of the unknown. You are a bridge." That was how it started. Not with lasers, not with battles, not with aliens marching down streets, with a human hand on a piece of alien wreckage, with a mind reaching out of the dark to grab the first thread it could find. They kept me in that underground room for days. No windows, no clocks, meals slid through a slot like I was dangerous. Scientists asked questions in polite voices that could not hide their desperation. Generals argued about whether I was compromised, whether I should be isolated forever, whether killing me would be safer. And through it all, the voice returned, again and again, always the same presence, always the same weight. She told me fragments, not stories, not speeches, fragments, like someone throwing me pieces of a burning map. She showed me space not as a pretty backdrop, but as a cold hunting ground. She showed me fleets shaped like knives, and worlds turned to ash. She showed me her own ship, scarred and bleeding blue light, drifting near Jupiter while something larger circled like a shark. She was in a war older than our recorded history, a war between those who took and those who refused to be taken. And she had come to our system not because she wanted Earth, but because Earth was a doorway, a bright, loud, living doorway that would attract predators the way blood attracts wolves. She had tried to protect us from a distance, but distance was not enough anymore, because her enemies had finally traced her trail, and now she needed something she did not have: a human face, a human voice, a proof that would make other species hesitate before they attacked. Because in her culture, as she explained in careful meaning, a sovereign who claims protection must show sacrifice, must show vulnerability, must show that the protected are not cattle. She needed to bind herself publicly, to tie her honor to our survival, to make any attacker understand that harming us would not be a raid. It would be a war against her name, her fleet, her lineage. But why me? I asked her in my head. Why not a president, a general, someone important? Her response came like a quiet blade. Because your important people would use this bond as a weapon against their own. Because your important people would try to own me. Because you, Daniel Mercer, were offered fear and you chose understanding. Because you are ordinary, and ordinary is the root of your species. Because if I point at a king, they will think I am buying a throne. If I point at you, they will know I am buying nothing but trust. I hated how much that made sense, and I hated that it still did not make me feel safe. Now, standing on that rooftop, I realized the plan had reached its final step. She was doing it. She was binding herself, and she was binding me with her. The reporters were yelling again, asking what I had done, asking if I was a hostage, asking if I was a collaborator. My mouth went dry. The Queen turned her head slightly toward me, and in that small movement, I felt the pressure of her mind touch mine, gentle but undeniable, like a hand on my shoulder. Speak, her presence said, not in words, but in intention. They need your voice. I swallowed, and for a second I could not move. Then I leaned toward the microphones. I saw my reflection in a camera lens, pale, eyes too wide. A man who looked like he had accidentally walked into a war movie. I forced my lungs to work. I said, I did not ask for this. The crowd quieted, just enough to hear me. I said, I did not invite her. I did not sell anyone out. I did not make a deal for my own benefit. I took a breath. And I felt the weight of every person listening. Millions through screens. Billions through replays. I said, 2 weeks ago, something fell into our ocean. It was not a meteor. It was wreckage, alien wreckage, and it was still alive enough to call. For help, I paused, letting the words land, letting the fear settle. Because fear is real, and people will not trust you if you pretend it does not exist. I said, I heard her in my head. And she told me something I did not want to believe. She told me that other things were coming. Things that do not see us as people. Things that see us as materials. A sound moved through the crowd, half anger, half terror. Someone shouted that it was a lie. Another shouted that it was the truth. A woman cried out, just a raw human sound, like she had been holding it in since the ship appeared. I leaned closer. I said, listen. The single loud word cut the noise. I let my voice drop again. I said, I am not a hero. I am not special. I am a guy who spends his life turning one set of words into another, so people can understand each other without blood. I swallowed. I said, when she reached out, I could have pushed her away. I could have treated her like a monster. I could have treated her like a threat. I did not. I treated her like a voice, like a mind, like someone asking not to be alone in the dark. My throat tightened, and for a second, the rooftop blurred. Because memory has teeth, I saw the images she had shown me. Worlds burning. Children hiding under rubble that looked nothing like ours. I said, she is not here to take Earth. She is here because someone else wants to. And she is standing between us and them. A reporter shouted, what do they want? I looked at the Queen, and she looked back at me. Calm, unshaken, the translation from the podium answered for her. They want your water, your metals, your mines. They want your fear. The Queen lifted her hand again and pointed past the cameras. Not at the crowd, but at the skyline, at the city itself, at the millions of windows where people were watching. The voice said, your planet is loud with life. It is rare. It is valuable. It is tempting. I will not allow it to be consumed. The crowd held its breath again. Then the Queen did something I did not expect. She turned her palm upward, and the air above. It shimmered. A small holographic image appeared, bright and sharp. A rotating projection of something far away. It was not a planet, not exactly. It was a ring of ships, dozens, maybe hundreds, arranged like a net in deep space. And beyond them, like a bruise on the stars, was something bigger. A shape that made my stomach lurch. Because it did not look like a ship. It looked like a moving architecture, a drifting city of metal and hunger. The podium translated, this is what followed me. This is what I stopped. This is what will come again. A collective sound rose from the rooftop, not words, just human shock. I felt my hands gripping the podium harder, knuckles white. The Queen's presence brushed my mind again, steadying me. Then she did the most terrifying, most intimate thing possible. She reached out and took my wrist, lifting my hand into view. Of the cameras, her fingers were cool, her grip firm. The blue panels of the podium flared, and a line of light ran up my arm, not burning, but sinking into the skin like ink made of starlight. A symbol appeared on the inside of my wrist, simple and sharp, glowing, faint blue. The crowd reacted like someone had fired a gun. The podium translated, this mark is covenant. This mark means harm to him is harm to me. This mark means Earth is under my name. This mark means the next fleet that enters your sky enters a battlefield. My pulse hammered, and for a second, I could not feel my fingers. I leaned toward the microphones again, because if I did not speak now, people would write their own story, and their story would be worse. I said, I did not want a mark. I did not want to be proof. I wanted to go home. I wanted to hold my niece and tell her the world was not ending. My voice cracked, and I forced it steady. I said, I looked straight into the cameras, because you cannot whisper courage. You have to put it where people can see it. I said. And if the choice is between hiding and standing up, then we stand. The Queen's eyes turned toward me, and for the first time I saw something in them that looked almost like respect or grief. The podium translated her next words, and the air felt heavier as it spoke. Earth will be tested, not by me, by what comes next. You will be offered safety in exchange for surrender. You will be offered comfort in exchange for obedience. You will be offered survival in exchange for silence. Do not take those offers. A chill ran through me, because I knew she was not speaking in metaphors. Then she leaned closer to the microphones, and the translated voice lowered, as if the machine itself understood. This was the heart of it. If you want to remain free, you must become dangerous to those who would own you dangerous. That was the word that flipped something inside my chest, because humans have always been told we are fragile, that our wars prove we are immature, that our planet is a cradle we never grew out of. But I had seen what she showed me. I had seen species that were peaceful and still got erased. I had seen civilizations that were advanced and still got turned into resources. Peace was not a shield, only consequence was a shield. A journalist shouted, "How do we become dangerous?" The Queen lifted her chin, and the podium translated, "By becoming united. By refusing to sell each other for temporary relief. By learning faster than your fear. By remembering what you are." The crowd stirred, uncertain, hungry for instructions, for a plan, for anything that made the future feel like it could be shaped. Then the Queen's gaze swept the rooftop again. And when it returned to me, her presence pressed gently against my mind. "Tell them the second truth," she urged. "The one you are afraid to say." My stomach turned, because I knew what she meant. For myself, I stepped closer to the microphones. I said, "There is something else." I inhaled slow. I said, "She did not choose me because I am brave." When she reached out, I reached back. I did not ask what she could give me. I asked what she needed. And what she needed was a reason to believe we are worth the risk. My throat tightened again. I said, "You want to know what makes her protect us? It is not our weapons. It is not our money. It is not our power. It is our ability to change. It is our ability to look at an enemy and still see a mind. It is our ability to take pain and turn it into something that does not have to repeat." The rooftop went quiet again, but this time it was not only fear, it was something like focus. Like the beginning of a decision. The Queen raised her hand once more, and the podium translated, "I will remain in your sky for one cycle of your moon. I will observe. I will offer a channel. I will train those you select, not to serve me, to serve yourselves." The officials behind the cameras reacted instantly, whispers and frantic eye contact. Already thinking about committees and power and control, I felt sick, because I knew what she had said earlier, about important people trying to own her, trying to own this bond, trying to use it to tighten their grip on the rest of us. I leaned toward the microphones again, and without planning it, I said, "Nitrogen monoxide." The word exploded out of me, loud. Every head snapped toward me, even the soldiers. Even the Queen. I swallowed, realizing what I had just done on a world stage. Then I forced myself to continue, voice steady. I said, "If this becomes another tool for the powerful to control the powerless, we lose before the enemy even arrives." A wave of anger rolled through the officials, through the security detail, through the polished faces that had never been told no in their lives. But the crowd, the distant crowd beyond the cameras, the millions listening, I could feel them. They understood, because everyone knows what it feels like to be managed, to be used, to be told their life belongs to someone else's agenda. The Queen's eyes stayed on me, unreadable. Then her presence brushed my mind, a quiet approval, like a nod. The podium translated her words, "He speaks as a citizen, not a servant. That is why he is proof." A hush fell over the rooftop, and in that hush I felt something dangerous and beautiful rise in my chest, not confidence, not arrogance, something older. Something that has carried humans through ice ages and plagues and wars. A stubborn refusal to be livestock. The Queen lifted her hand toward the sky, and the massive ship responded, blue accents brightening, geometry shifting like the vessel was adjusting its stance, readying itself. The helicopters drifted back, the cameras kept rolling. Hungry, the podium translated one final message, and the words hit like a drumbeat. Earth is under my protection. Earth is under my witness. Earth is under its own choice. Choose. The Queen stepped back from the microphones, and for the first time she looked. I saw it, and something in me softened, because I realized she was not only a conqueror guarding territory, she was a shield holding back a storm. And shields crack. I leaned close to the microphones one last time, and I spoke to the cameras, to the planet, to the frightened people behind locked doors. I said, we are not alone anymore. That is terrifying, but it is also a chance. I lifted my marked wrist so the cameras could see the blue symbol glowing faintly. I said, if she is telling the truth, then something is coming, and if something is coming, then we do what humans have always done when the dark closes in. We build fires, we stand shoulder to shoulder, we learn, we adapt, we survive. I took a breath, and I let my voice rise, not screaming, but strong, the kind of strength that makes people sit up. I said, humanity does not bow to hunger. The rooftop erupted. Not in panic this time, but in noise that sounded like the first spark of defiance. And her expression did not change, but I felt her presence in my mind again. A whisper of meaning that settled into my bones. Good, let them be loud, let them be alive, because now, Daniel Mercer, you are not just proof, you are a signal, and signals travel. That night, after the rooftop cleared, after the cameras shut down, after the officials tried to pull me into meetings and secure rooms and careful lies, I slipped away for 10 minutes, just 10. I stood on a side street near the river where I could see the ship hanging over the city, huge and silent. People were gathered on rooftops and balconies, staring up, some holding hands, some holding flags, some holding nothing but their fear. A little girl near me asked her mother if the Queen was an angel. Her mother did not answer, because mothers are not trained for this. I looked at the blue mark on my wrist, glowing faintly under the streetlights, and I whispered, not to the crowd, not to the cameras, but to the Queen in the sky. I said, if you make me proof, then I need the truth, all of it. Her presence touched my mind immediately, like she had been listening the whole time. The truth came in a slow wave of meaning, heavy with warning. The fleet will come sooner than you think. They will not strike the loudest city first. They will strike where you are weakest. They will offer deals to the ones who think they can profit from surrender. They will try to turn your nations into knives against each other. I felt my chest tighten. I whispered, how do we stop them? Her presence was steady, relentless. You stop them by refusing to be divided. You stop them by making your world expensive to take. You stop them by becoming a species that learns war without loving it. You stop them by proving to the universe that humans do not break into silence when threatened. I stared up at the ship, at the blue lights that pulsed like a heartbeat. I thought of my sister, my niece, my father. I thought of every stranger in the city who had looked up today and felt their life become fragile. I whispered, tell me what you need from me. Her presence paused, and for the first time it felt almost gentle. I need you to remain human. I need you to speak truth when others speak advantage. I need you to stand in front of your own people and remind them that fear is not a plan. I need you to be proof that a species can be dangerous without becoming a monster. I swallowed, and my voice broke when I answered. I said I will try. Her presence settled like armor on my mind. Try is the beginning. Now we build the next step. I stood there until my legs ached, until the city's noise turned into a low, restless hum. Above me the ship held its position, silent, massive, patient. And for the first time in 7 months of uploading stories and watching people leave early, I understood something about attention. That had nothing to do with algorithms. People do not stay for perfection. They stay for stakes. They stay when a story feels like it matters. They stay when they can feel a heart beating inside the words. They stay when they sense the next moment could change everything. I turned back toward the city, toward whatever rooms and arguments and plans waited for me. I looked at the mark on my wrist again, and I felt the weight of being pointed at, being chosen, being proof. Then I whispered the words I knew I would have to repeat to the world, again and again, until they believed them. We are protected, but protection is not salvation. Protection is a chance, and now we prove ourselves. Now we prove that Earth is not a resource. Now we prove that humanity is not a meal. Now we prove that when an alien queen points at an ordinary man and calls him proof, the proof is not her power. The proof is what humans do next.